Hello and welcome dear students. Today we are going to discuss a very important topic, that is historical and legal approach to comparative politics. Let me first briefly outline the objectives of today's lecture. Number 1, to have understanding of traditional approach and its nature. Number 2, critical evaluation of historical approach. Number 3, to understand the legal approach to comparative politics, and finally, the shortcomings of traditional approach. Let us first talk about what is traditional approach. Approaches to the study of politics may be broadly classified into two categories: normative and empirical. While the former is said to be value laden, the latter is known for being value neutral. In other words, while normativism is the hallmark of the former, empiricism is that of the latter. The traditional approach to comparative politics was broadly predominant till the occurrence of the Second World War. These approaches were mainly associated with the traditional outlook of politics, which underlined the study of the state and government. Consequently, traditional approaches are principally concerned with the study of the organization and activities of the state and principles and ideas which motivate political organizations and activities. These approaches were normative and principal. The political philosophers supporting these approaches and raised questions such as what should be an ideal state. According to them, the study of political science should be limited to the formal structures of the government, laws, rules and regulations. Therefore, the supporters of the traditional approaches stress various norms such as what ought to be or should be rather than what is. The traditional approaches have a historical, descriptive and prescriptive character with a dominating place for values and goals. The nature of traditional approach are mostly normative and stresses on the values of politics. Prominence is on the study of different political structures. Traditional approaches made very little attempt to relate theory and research. These approaches consider that since facts and values are closely interlinked, studies in political science can never be scientific. Dear students, let us now talk about historical approach. The distinguishing feature of this approach is focused on the past or on a selected period of time as well as on a sequence of selected events within a particular phase, so as to find out an explanation of what institutions are and are intending to be, more in the knowledge of what they have been and how they came to be, what they are, then in the analysis of them as they stand. It may also be added that there is a scholar treats history as a genetic process, as a study of how man got to be what man once was and now is. A study of politics with such a point of view also informs him to look into the role of individual motives, actions, accomplishments, failures and contingencies in historical continuity and change. Without studying the past political events, institutions and political environment, the analysis of the present would remain largely imperfect. Main attribute of historical approach is that history as a written or recorded subject and focuses on the past events. From history, researchers come to know how man was in the past and what he is now. History is the storehouse of events. From the profiles, autobiographies, descriptions by authors and journalists, investigators know what event occurred in the past. It is to be prominent that the events must have political revealing or they must be politically significant. These events provide the best materials upon which theory and principles of political science are built. History communicates researchers how government, political parties and many other institutions worked, their successes and failures, and from these they receive lessons which guide them in determining the future course of action. The historical approach stands on the assumption that the stock of political theory comes out of socio-economic crisis and the reactions they have on the minds of the great thinkers. Thus, historical evidence has an importance of its own. The conditions of ancient Greece created Plato and Aristotle. Likewise, the conditions of 17th century England produced Hobbes and Locke. The capitalist system of the 19th century created Mill and Marx. Obviously, in order to understand political theory, it is equally necessary to understand clearly the time, place and circumstances in which it was evolved. The political philosopher may not actually take part in the politics of his times, but he is affected by it and in his own turn he tries vigorously to affect it. Sabine well takes note of this fact when he observes that all great political theories are secreted in the interstices of political and social crisis. It may, however, be added at this stage that the historical approach to burning political questions differ in many ways depending upon the range of choice that a scholar adopts for his purpose. If Machiavelli could make use of history for exalting the record of the Romans and thereby exhorting his people to restore the glory of Rome, Oxford associates it with the trend of conservatism. It is contained in his treatment of politics as the activity of attending to the general arrangements of a collection of people who, in respect of their common recognition of a manner of attending to its arrangements, compose a single community. That is, a political activity mainly springs neither from instant desires nor from general principles, but from the existing traditions of behavior themselves. As he says, in any generation, even the most revolutionary, the arrangements which are enjoyed always far exceed those which are recognized to stand in need of attention, and those which are being prepared for enjoyment are few in comparison with those which receive amendment. The new is an insignificant proportion of the whole. Again, what we are learning to understand is a political tradition, a concrete manner of behavior, and for this reason it is proper that at the academic level the study of politics should be an historical study. The historical approach has certain weaknesses. For instance, Bryce says it is often loaded with superficial resemblances. As such, historical parallels may sometimes be illuminating, but they are also misleading in most of the cases. Likewise, Professor Ernest Barker holds there are many lines, some that suddenly drop, some that turn back, some that cross one another, and one may think rather of the maze of tracks on a wide common than of any broad king's highway. That is, a scholar subscribing to this approach adheres to a particular path of his choice in making use of historical data and then offering his explanation, so much so that other important aspects are virtually ignored. It is also possible that he may play with his emotions and prejudices while making use of this approach, as we may find in the cases of Machiavelli and Michael Oxford. Nevertheless, the value of the study of political theory in the context of its historical evolution and growth cannot be so lightly dismissed. Works of J. Sabine, R. G. Gattel, W. A. Dunning, C. C. Maxey, T. I. Cook, R. J. Carley, G. E. G. Catlin, C. E. Vaughan, etc., have an importance of their own. Such an approach has its own usefulness in understanding the meaning of eminent political theorists, from Plato and Aristotle in ancient to Saint Augustine, Saint Thomas and Morsillo in the middle, and thereon to Machiavelli, Bodin, Hobbes, John Locke, Rousseau, Hegel, J. S. Mill, Karl Marx and Lasky in the modern ages. If political theory has a universal and respectable character, its reason should be traced in the affirmation that it is rooted in historical traditions. The historical approach to the study of politics has numerous challenges from several quarters. One of the main fulcrums of the challenge is that history has two phases. One is documentation of facts, which is quite new, and the other is construal of facts and phenomena. The accretion of evidences is to be judged from a proper perspective. The implication is that adequate care should be taken while evaluating evidence and facts, and such a caution is not always strictly followed, and as a result the historical facts do not serve the purpose of those who use it. This is the main complaint against the historical approach to the study of politics. Alan Ball has also criticized the historical approach. He debated that past evidence does leave alarming gaps, and political history is often simply a record of great men and great events, rather than a comprehensive account of total political activity. Very few historians interpret historical events and evidences broadly and freely. Dear students, let us now talk about the legal approach, which is also a part of the traditional approach. In the realm of traditional approaches, we may refer to the legal or juridical approach. Here, the study of politics is mixed up with legal processes and institutions. Themes of law and justice are treated as not mere affairs of jurisprudence. Rather, political scientists look at state as the maintainer of an effective and equitable system of law and order. Matters relating to the organization, jurisdiction and independence of judicial institutions therefore become an essential concern of a political scientist. Analytical jurists from Cicero in the ancient times to Dicey in the modern periods have regarded state as primarily a corporation or a juridical person, and in this way viewed politics as a science of legal norms having nothing in common with the science of the state as a social organism. Thus, this approach treats the state primarily as an organization for the creation and enforcement of law. In this context, we may refer to the works of Jane Bodin, Hugh Grotius and Thomas Hobbes of the early modern period, who propounded the doctrine of sovereignty. In the system of Hobbes, the head of the state is the highest legal authority, and his command is law that must be obeyed either to avoid punishment following its infraction or to keep the dreadful state of nature away. The works of Bentham, John Austin, Savigny, Sir Henry Maine and A. V. Dicey may also be referred to in this connection. The result is that the study of politics is integrally bound up with the legal processes of the country, and the existence of a harmonious state of liberty and equality is earmarked by the glorious name of the rule of law. The legal approach applied to the study of national as well as international politics stands on the assumption that law prescribes actions to be taken in a given contingency and also forbids the same in certain other situations. It even fixes the limits of permissible action. It also emphasizes the fact that where the citizens are law abiding, the knowledge of law provides a very important basis for predictions relating to political behavior of the people. A distinguished student of this approach like Jelinek advises us to treat organized society not as a mere social or political phenomena, but as an ensemble of public law rights and obligations founded on a system of pure logic or reason. It implies that the state as an organism of growth and development cannot be understood without a consideration of those extra legal and social forces which lie at the back of the consideration, and for this reason are responsible for many of its actions and mutual reactions. It may, however, be pointed out that this approach has a very narrow perspective. Law embraces only one aspect of a people's life, and as such it cannot cover the entire behavior of the political actors, as the idealists can be criticized for treating state as nothing else but a moral entity. So, the analytical jurists commit the mistake of reducing every aspect of a political system to a juridical entity. Determination of the content of law through legislative power is a political act, ordinarily to be explained on the basis of something other than a legal approach. The traditional approaches may be said to have four main varieties as discussed earlier. Their outstanding feature is that value laden system dominates. Normativism assigns to them a peculiar and distinctive character. As a result of this, political theory is said to have become abstract, hypothetical, speculative, and even metaphysical. On the whole, normativism lays stress on the significant discussion. It looks to the establishment of a moral criterion of political conduct and asks questions about the nature of the state and its ends. The limit of one's obligations to obey the commands, the basis and content of the individual's rights and freedom, the form of good life, and so on. Dear students, let us now talk about the shortcomings of traditional approaches. Number one is it focuses on Western political systems. It dealt primarily with a single culture configuration, Western world. Number second, it dealt mainly with representative democratic systems as their aberrations. Number third, it prevented a student from dealing systematically with Western as well as non-Western systems. Number four, research was just superficial, as it was founded on the study of isolated aspects of the governmental process within specific countries. Number second important criticism against this approach is that it is excessively formalistic in its approach. The analysis was focused on the formal institutions of government to the determinant of a sophisticated awareness of the informal arrangements of society and of their role in the formation of decisions and the exercise of power. Secondly, it proved to be relatively insensitive to the non-political determinants of political behavior, and hence to the non-political basis of governmental institutions. Thirdly, comparison was made in terms of the formal constitutional aspects of Western systems, which are not necessarily the most fruitful concepts for a truly comparative study. One more important point on which this approach is being questioned, rather criticized, is descriptive rather than problem solving nature. Except for some studies of proportional representation, emergency legislation and elected systems, the field was insensitive to hypotheses and their verification. Secondly, even in the purely descriptive approach to political systems, it was relatively insensitive to the methods of cultural anthropology, in which descriptions are fruitfully made in terms of general concepts or integrating hypotheses. Thirdly, thus description in comparative government did not readily lend itself to the testing of hypotheses, to the compilation of significant data regarding a single political phenomena or class of such phenomena in a large number of societies. Fourthly, description without systematic orientation obstructed the discovery of hypotheses regarding uniformities in political behavior and prevented the formulation on a comparative basis of a theory of political dynamics, change, revolution, conditions of stability, etc. Now, let us talk about the factors accounting for our increasing awareness in this regard. The prevalent dissatisfaction with the country by country approach in teaching and research, the study of foreign governments is not in any sense of the word comparative study. It results in making superficial similarities and differences between political systems. Secondly, the need to broaden our approach by including in our study non-Western systems and by attempting to relate the contextual elements of any system with the political process. Thirdly, the growing concern with policy making and policy implementation. It is probably not untrue to say that research is often related to the broad exigencies of policy making. Its global requirements have suggested the close interrelationships of a number of factors that were considered to be separate in the past and have shown the fallacy of compartmentalization that is of area studies. Finally, comparative analysis is being increasingly a part and parcel of the growing concern with the scientific approach to politics. To conclude today's lecture, we may say that while traditional approaches lean to the side of values. The traditional approaches have a historical, descriptive and prescriptive character with a dominating place for values and goals. With this, we have ended today's lecture. Thank you for listening it patiently, and I hope you have enjoyed it.